So welcome to Safety Connection Ladders in Restaurant and Retail. I'm Tova Larson. I'm a health and safety consultant based in Ottawa, Ontario, and I've been with workplace safety and prevention services now for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in May. But I have been in the health and safety field now for about 20 years. And in that time, I've worked in the private sector, the public sector. I've worked in the federally regulated sector and the provincially regulated sector. I've also had the opportunity to work in retail, and obviously I'm also someone who's in retail businesses on a regular basis, often as a customer, but also as a consultant and as someone who does a very large amount of training. I've trained more than 10,000 certified members of joint health and safety committees over the last 10 years, and ladders are one of those things that are ubiquitous in workplaces. Um, I am almost never at a workplace that doesn't have at least one. And yet, almost everywhere I go, I have those moments where I go, that doesn't look like a great idea. So that's really how this session started. It started with me seeing a lot of the pain points that organizations are having with the use of ladders. And we really wanted to focus in on more of the light industrial side rather than focusing on the manufacturing side. We're focusing here on the retail and restaurant sector specifically. In case you're wondering what I like to do for fun and why I love the snow so much, I'm an avid skier and I'm a ski patroller at a local ski hill when I'm not working. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my background. Let's move in now to talking about what we're going to be covering here in our program. So our agenda here today starts with just a quick perspective of a service sector perspective of falls from heights. We're then going to be discussing how to recognize fall risks and some of those contributing factors that lead to falls. We'll also be discussing assessing working at heights related tasks. So really able to look and say, okay, when we think about probability and severity, and we'll be, funneling this all through the RACE model for those of you that might be familiar with that, what are those things that actually increase our risk of a fall? We'll be talking about controls. How do we reduce the risk? We'll talk about how to evaluate the effectiveness of your control measures, and we will also be talking at the end about how WSPS can help, including a whole host of no-cost resources that we have available on our website, as well as some no-cost interaction, like one-on-one, that we can help you with. So I really want to highlight that we have some resourcing available that is no cost. Because when we think about retail restaurant, we've got some large retailers, but we also have some small retailers. And we want to make sure that there's something good for everyone. So we are heading right into our first poll here. And just waiting for that to load up here. So which sector, we're looking at 2017. It was the latest statistic I was able to find from the ministry. Which sector had the highest number of falls from heights in 2017? Was it healthcare, service, transportation, or construction? What do you think? So again, the poll would have probably popped up in the front of your screen. If not, you'll find it in the chat. All right. So I see some answers coming in our chat here today. All right, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to give you, 10, maybe 5 more seconds to click on your answer. All right. So the correct answer is, you might be surprised to learn. So of the group here, 52% selected construction. 3% selected healthcare, 3% transportation, and 41% selected service. But you might be surprised to learn that, in fact, it was service that had the highest number of falls from heights in the province in 2017. And not by a little bit, by a lot. In fact, there were more falls from heights in the service sector in the province of Ontario than the two next leading categories of healthcare and construction alone. Construction was number 3. And even if you add both healthcare and construction together, you are still not even close. So there were approximately 2,868 falls in service sector alone from a height. And these are only the ones we know about because they resulted in injury. Does that surprise you? I'd love to know in the chat. Are you surprised? Are you like, nope, this sounds completely on brand? There we go. We've got some reacting. Remember, we've got the react button. Are you actually surprised? Or you're like, no. Right? Folks think when they think about falls from heights, when they think about falls from ladders in particular, that it is falls in construction that are number 1, and it isn't even a contest at this point. So this is one of the reasons that this session was so top of mind for me. I've been, advocating for this for a while, and here we are. We have, Cheryl's like, I'm not surprised. Julia was surprised. It even surprised me when I went digging into the stats. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's high, but I didn't know it was that high. Next poll. Falls from heights of less than 3 meters pose a low risk of serious injury. Now, of course, in the province, we do have legislation that requires fall arrest above in the industrial sector. It's Section 85 that talks about providing a serviceable safety harness for those that are working above 3 meters. And the question then is, if you're falling from less than 3 meters, if it's above 3 meters, they say you need to be protected, but if it's below 3 meters, what do you think the risk of injury actually is? All right, I couldn't fool you on this one at all. You are correct. 84% of folks have said that this is false, and you would be accurate. In terms of the number of falls from heights that are less than 3 meters, there are in fact far more injuries numbers-wise for workers that are falls from less than 3 meters than there are even from falls of more than 3 meters. Why? Because falls from more than 3 meters, for those that are in fact complying with our legislation, tend to be protected falls, meaning you have a serviceable safety harness that arrests your fall. Falls from less than 3 meters, in fact, do result in a very large portion of our fall injury picture. Also, folks are, often working at heights of less than 3 meters. It happens more often working at very high heights, much more sector specific, a lot of controls in place, including, of course, our Ministry CPO, Chief Prevention Officer. It's not ministry accredited, but it is Chief Prevention Officer accredited working at heights training. That is focused largely on the construction and some of those other high-risk sectors. All right, next poll. According to WorkSafe BC, but again, when we think about Canada, BC is not that different than Ontario. According to them, what was the average, the median number of lost time days per claim for ladder falls specifically? For ladder falls specifically. I found this one interesting because it was all about ladders. Okay, I'm seeing some results coming in. Okay. Yeah, about half of you picked the right answer, and it was in fact 18 days. That was the. It was in fact 18 days that was the correct answer. According to WorkSafe BC, what proportion of claims from falls from ladders in the service sector resulted in serious injury claims? Was it 19%, 34%, 42%, or 50%? And this is in service sector. Remember that. So we're not lumping in construction. We're not lumping in mining, forestry, any of those other sectors. This is specifically the service industry. So things like retail, restaurant, offices. All right. So 19% of folks said that it was, or 16% of our folks here said it was 19%. 29% of our folks here said that it was 34%. 46% said that it was 42%. 13% says 50%. And I am going to surprise you and tell you it's 50%. 50%. So not only when we look at the statistics around the number of falls that are happening in the service sector, it's shockingly high, but also the burden of serious injury in the service sector is shockingly high. If a full 50% of the claims related to this particular piece of equipment result in serious injury claims, that's really concerning. And we have our last poll here in this portion. I would love for you to tell me how long you think it takes for a human being to fall 3 meters. And just so we're all extremely clear on this, this model negates air drag, and the weight of the human actually doesn't matter here. Because we're not measuring the force at which they land, although the heavier you are and the further you fall, the harder you land. How long do you think it takes for you to fall 3 meters? Nicely done, folks. It is in fact 0.78 seconds is the correct answer. That is in fact how long it takes for you. And we had, going and closing that poll here. So yeah, it was in fact, we didn't manage to fool you here. 71% said that it was, remember, that's less than a second. So anyone who tells you that if they think they're going to fall, they're going to land on their feet, they're like, yeah, I'm going to be able to, like, if I'm falling, I'll land on my feet, kind of like a cat. What is the human reaction time even to be able to realize that you're falling? By the time you realize you're falling, you're already over. Like, you don't have the ability to decide you're going to land on your feet. You're going to land on whatever you're going to land on, both hazards below and part of body. You have lost control over your center of gravity. That's the whole purpose of when we say why are we falling? It's because our center of gravity has gone outside of our center of support ultimately. And so you don't really have time for that to figure out how you're going to land. This is a chat question because I want you to guess. According to both North American and Scandinavian studies, over what percent of all incidents involving ladders were the result of unsafe acts by their users? Now, this is not just service. This is ladders overall. So homes, workplaces, any other place you can think of. Justin, I could not fool you. It is 95%. I think maybe the private view was not clicked off. It is not, yeah, 99%. It's really high. It's 95% was in fact the stat. So it's an interesting take, right? That it's when folks are using ladders, often they're doing things that they should not be doing with their ladders. We are going to talk about better ladders. We are going to talk a little bit about options that don't involve ladders. But we're also going to talk about work practices because we cannot separate the equipment from the people at the end of the day. So let's take a look now. For those of you that may be familiar with RACE, it's the same RACE we've always had, but we are going to be talking about the RACE process where we recognize and gather information about our hazard. I always like to start with some surprising stats because it really catches folks' attention. We're now going to talk a little bit more about how to recognize some of those higher risk tasks and activities. Then we're going to talk about assessing the level of risk. So thinking about the things that lead to precarity on a ladder. as well as things that impact the severity of how serious the harm could be if a fall did occur. We're going to talk about options for controls, and then of course we're going to evaluate. So this is another one of these chat questions, and I would love to know from you, what tasks are you actually performing where you're using ladders or step stools? We're not just talking about A-frame ladders, they can be extension ladders. We are also talking about step stools. We're talking about rolling ladders, so the rolling staircase style. One of my colleagues, my customers calls theirs Big Blue. What are the actual tasks and activities that you're performing? So in case for Jessica, it's shelving items. Yeah, that's a super common one. Grabbing footwear boxes, super common. Accessing goods, cleaning is really common. Stocking, changing light bulbs, putting away product onto shelving, taking things down from storage, lots of cleaning as well happening. Yeah, I've in my retail days, the words if you have time to lean, you have time to clean were a common phrase that was said in the store that I worked in. Yeah, so lots of different things that we're doing on ladders, and we'll talk a little bit about short-term light work in a few minutes. But yes, stocking, absolutely. And so what have we got going on here? And you hit on so many of them. Cleaning. In this photo, what do you see that you think increases the risk of a fall here? What's wrong? Or you're like, and if you think this is, you're like, this is fine, I don't have any concerns, you can go ahead and reset. Reaching, yeah, there's no 3-point contact. We're going to be talking about, there's 3 points of contact, and then there's 3 points of control, and they're not quite the same. Yeah, anything else that you see going on here? Ladder is too small. Yeah, top of ladder is below waist level. Yeah, the ladder here is definitely too short. Are there other things though that you think could potentially lead to a slip or either a slip or a fall off this ladder? There's the hazards behind the worker. That's a great catch, Chris. And those, depending on if they're hot, they are at the very least pointy. And pointy is not something that you like landing on. The foot covers. Natalie, I was hoping someone would spot those. Because now you have these little booty things, and they're like, whoof, you're gone on that ladder. And so you don't actually have grip of the shoe to the ladder. Anything else? What about the task that's being done? Is there anything about this task that you're going, okay, I think there's potential here that this could, in fact, increase the risk? A couple seconds. Could get dizzy looking up. That is actually a great point. Yeah, as we look up, we can start getting into that vertigo and increasing the risk of a fall, often backward. Yeah, so there is the working overhead aspect. There's also musculoskeletal disorder risks here. If you're working above your head for more than 4 hours a day, tension neck syndrome, like I wish your neck the best of luck, because it's not going to be a happy neck. Shoulder injuries, absolutely. Looks like a gas line of some kind. I think I couldn't tell whether I think he's cleaning. What you're seeing are the fire suppression system. If you're looking at like the little nozzles, that's the fire suppression system that's in a commercial kitchen hood. One of the most fascinating things with this is that if you are cleaning and you've got a greasy hood, you've got would 100% hit my head off of those. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's also head hit that could also lead to a fall. We forget that, like, once you hit your head, what are you going to do? You're going to back away, and then you're going to lose your balance. What's also fascinating here is the grease of the hood is, if you're cleaning with like a degreaser, especially with some of these really harsh type soaps that they use to clean these hoods to get, like, the built up gunk off, that's all soapy. So now you've got soap that's dripping down. Soap is slippery. You're in a commercial kitchen where the floor underneath all of that grill that just got moved away may also be greasy. So you've got a greasy floor, you've got grease that's dripping down on you, you've got soap that's dripping down on you. all increasing the risk. So now the ladder is also getting covered in detergent and grease at the same time. That is a high-risk task. And I haven't even mentioned that the worker put on the suit, but somehow didn't put the hood on. Mind blown. I don't like getting detergent on my head any more than I like getting it on any other part of my body. All right, what's going on here? This one's a little bit quicker. But yeah, do you see anything wrong in these photos? Nothing's wrong. This looks totally fine. Standing on the top rung. He's actually standing just below that. But it's one of those ladders that is in fact designed to be climbed from either side. Standing too high. Yep. Not the right ladder for the task. The one on the left. Yeah, no pedestrian control. That's another great point. And we will talk about pedestrian and traffic control as an element of this. Distracted. I'm so glad you caught up on that one. Yes. We've got someone who's got an electronic device and they're trying to device while standing on this ladder. Many hazards around him. Absolutely. He could definitely hit his head. In all likelihood, if he starts to fall, the first thing he's going to grab is the light. And then he's going to bring that down, and that's electrical. So there's risk there too. When we look at the step ladder on the right, is there anything about it that you'd be like, maybe we don't want to use this? That you're like, I have follow-up questions about this object. Yeah, there's no support. She has nothing to lean on. And if she falls, she's likely going to grab a shelf, and then she's going to bring the shelf and then all of the stuff on the shelf down with her. And if that wasn't bad enough, what's the weight capacity of a plastic little stepladder like that? Yeah, ladder on the right looks cheap, seems flimsy, super light. This is also someone who is, I would say, like an average size, like mid-sized person. But ladders have a weight capacity, and if it's not marked, and I have absolutely no reason to believe that there's a weight capacity marked on this thing, I will give it a reasonable props for having rubber grippy feet, but that is about the nicest thing that I can say about this object. So yeah, not great. Anything interesting about this one? And this is an interesting ladder to look at. I like to say some places will choose their ladders because they look good, but not because they're actually super practical. Yeah, those ladders can collapse if they aren't pulled out properly. That is also true. Yeah, definitely. You'll have sore feet from the rung. Yes, absolutely. You're putting all of your weight on something that's like this big. Just across your foot. And that's going to be very, very uncomfortable. Because it's also rounded, you don't, rather than having a flat, you can also much more easily slip your foot through the ladder than you would on something that has a wider, flatter step. Yeah, there's not a lot of foot support. They're reaching through. Yeah, they're also reaching through the ladder, it looks like, which is not a great idea. One thing that you may not realize with ladders is that you're relying quite heavily, especially on something like this, for your grip strength to be able to keep you on the ladder. So if this person goes to reach over, it becomes a dance between how much grip strength do I have versus the gravity that's being exerted on my body. And if you're having to grip, you also can lead to fatigue in that grip, and then you struggle to maintain control over your body weight. Another interesting thing about this particular ladder is that with the round rungs, those round rungs are made of metal and they don't have any sort of non-slip tread on them. So it's likely going to be an enameled surface, which is in and of itself also really slippery. Yeah, and very easy to lose balance and fall backward because the angle of that ladder is on quite a steep angle. If it is attached at the top, if it's on a rail or something like that, well, the ladder may not keel backward. The worker is not on an angle that is preferable. And so the risk of a fall backward is quite a bit higher. What about this? This one is a little bit simpler, but I think you hit on this in one of the others as well. What do we think about this one? Yeah, should have somebody, handle the box. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, there's no way to maintain 3 points of contact. And when we talk about 3 points of control or 3 points of contact, one of the things that we need to remember is there's no way to be able to maintain 3 points of control if we have something in our hands and we're climbing or descending. Because as you move your feet or as you're moving your hands, you just cannot if I've got something in my hands, you just can't do it. The ladder also does look too far away from the shelf. I think she's positioned it as close as she reasonably can if she's facing forward. But it is going to have to cause her to reach and have more leverage on that object as well. Yeah, which is a great point. And last of the what problems do we see? Task-wise, handling materials in back rooms are some of the things that I see the most with ladders. And it's an area of concern. So what do you see here that you're like, I have concerns? I saw this photo and my first thought was, I have all the concerns. Every concern you can imagine. Absolutely. Yeah, housekeeping. The boxes are overhanging. The low lighting. Yep, definitely. Anything else? What about the ladder choice? There's clutter. The wooden ladder. Yeah, the ladder doesn't appear to be correct. I have no reason to believe that that ladder has a weight capacity. The rungs are sort of like this, so you're going to end up putting all of your force right kind of onto an edge. Super narrow. Boxes store too high. That's a great point, Alifa, is that it may actually impact your sprinkler system. You do need to maintain clearances for your fire suppression system. And when we think about storage areas, there's so much material in here that if a fire were to occur, it is doubly important that your fire system is in fact able to operate appropriately, because a sprinkler is the difference between a small fire and a bunch of water damage versus, a building destroying type fire. So it's important to maintain those clearances appropriately. One of the things I also think, ladder is used incorrectly, an A-frame, as opposed to an extension. He's using an A-frame as an extension. Yeah, that's also something that I've seen many, many times. Looks like display being set up potentially used as a ladder. Maybe. That's also possible. Where they're actually using a fixture as a ladder. Unapproved equipment. Huge issue. I also will point out that if you have this level of housekeeping in your facility, even if you're using the right ladder, positioning the ladder becomes a big challenge, because you've got so much stuff that you're like, oh, am I going to move those 3 boxes over here to be able to get these boxes down? And then how are you getting those down on a ladder? Like, those are huge. So they're awkward, they're bulky. Even if I do have a second person to bring these down, just being on a ladder with something that big and then having to pass it to another person is actually quite risky. So a lot of things we could dig in. This photo is like a 20-minute conversation, but we're going to move forward to talk a little bit about what the CSA has found about ladder incidents. So the CSA did a meta-analysis of 58,950 ladder falls in British Columbia and Ontario between 1992 and 2018, which is a very long span of time. and a very large number of ladder incidents. And what they found was that 58% of these involved portable ladders, as opposed to fixed access ladders, which are like mounted on the side of your building, which you may also have. So when we look at portable ladders specifically, 28% of the injuries were from falls, but that's not the only source of injury for ladders either. 21% involved MSDs just from carrying, handling, or moving the ladder. 15% involved MSDs while standing on a ladder, and we're going to talk about those too. 6% involved being struck by a ladder, either in a fall where they fell and they weren't hurt, but then the ladder hitting them hurt them, or it was somebody who swung around and like smacked somebody in the head with a ladder. 5% involved falls while carrying or moving the ladder itself, and 3% the ladder was actually a secondary cause of an injury. Now, I'm really curious to see, now that we've talked a little bit about 3 points of control, what are you doing to maintain your 3 points of control? Are you using work processes? Are you using, something where you've got a work platform that they're able to put the objects on? Given the type of tasking that many of you are experiencing, so stocking, back room, shoe boxes, how are you currently managing your, especially picking, but really any of the tasks you're doing? How are you maintaining your 3 points of control? And this isn't a rhetorical question. If you're actually doing this, I would love to know what you're doing so you can share it with the group. And if you're not doing this, we're going to talk about some ways to get you there. Going once, going twice in the chat. Slowing down and counting. Okay, that is one of those things, is having enough staff, taking the time. That makes all the difference. All right, feel free to continue sharing if you're still typing. I would love for you to keep sharing about what you are doing. Change most A-frame ladders to ladders with platform. Allows for stocking. Excellent. Change some ladders in the stockroom to Big Blues. That's another great option. Yep, and we'll talk a little bit about the Big Blues. And there are so many different options today, different ladder styles. In the last even 5 years, I've seen just a fantastic sea change in what's available. And I'm really excited to share some of that with you today. Another area of concern in the retail restaurant sector is contractors. Even if your staff are not the ones using ladders to get up high, many of you are in fact hiring other people to come in, whether it be electricians, it could be people that are doing store fit out, they could be doing any number of things. It can be your contractors that might be coming in and cleaning your hoods if you're on the restaurant side of things. Contractor safety management is critical. This was another, 3 points of contact problem. He's also twisting, which is never good. I'm really curious, and we do have a poll, as we're thinking about contractors. I would love to know whether you do in fact have a contractor safety management plan, a strategy, a policy, anything relating to contractors. And I'm going to share a quick story while we're answering this. So I was at a major retailer in Thunder Bay that shall remain nameless, and I was teaching a certification course. And in the course, we have an example of something we would describe as a dangerous circumstance. A dangerous circumstance is a circumstance in which 3 things are occurring simultaneously. The act or regulations is being contravened, the contravention poses a danger or hazard to a worker, and the contravention and hazard are such that any delay in controlling it may seriously endanger a worker. I had just shown that slide. I walked out of the room to go to the washroom, and what did I spot? I spotted a dangerous circumstance. I spotted someone on a ladder, leaned against the racking, working on the ceiling of a big box type building. And of course, you know, I'm going to intervene, and the manager was right behind me, and I turned to him and I said, I have concerns. And he said famous last words. He said, oh, he's just a contractor. He was 30 feet in the air. Easily. So if you aren't factoring in your contractors, you need to. And one of my favorite questions to ask contractors, retailers, or really anyone, my 3 favorite questions are, how are y'all getting that down? How are y'all getting up there? And how are you going to keep yourself from falling? I'm right now at home in the process of finding a contractor to work on my chimney. And it is the second question after, do you have WSIB, is tell me exactly how you're going to do that. Like, walk me through it like I'm 5. And if they don't have a good answer, they're not coming to my house. Yes, 70% of you said that you do have a contractor management program. If you do not, if you're in the 30% who said no, you can put this on your hot list, especially around ladders, because so many of those contractors are using ladders when they go to your facility. So let's talk a little bit about the physics of actually what's going on when we fall. Ultimately, falling is about center of mass and center of support. So let's say I've got a person here on my ladder. I'm going to go and stand them on this rung here. Here's my person. The drawings are bad. I'm aware. Now this person appears to be leaning. This person is really, really badly drawn. But one of the challenges is, and this person's center of support, when we think about a center of mass versus center of support, our center of mass, if we're a woman, it's a little bit lower, just a little bit below the belly button. Women tend to be a little bit bigger on the bottom half. Men tend to be a little bit bigger on the top half, have broader shoulders. So their center of gravity is just a little bit above the belly button. But when we talk about center of mass, the center of mass can change. So if I go and take this person's arms and I stick them out here, and I put a box over here, the center of mass has now shifted. And if this is particularly heavy, instead of having my center of mass kind of midpoint of the body, my center of mass is now somewhere over here. And if it is, where do you think the person is going? They go this way, which is down, which is the fall. We're going to go back a slide, try to erase this. Okay, so here we've got our person. So overreaching is a huge issue. When we think about our center of support is centered right at the bottom here. So one of the big challenges, the taller the ladders we get, the more unstable they become, because your center of mass is getting further and further and further from your center of support. That's one of the physics problems with tall ladders. So the taller you get, the less likely you should be using a ladder in the first place. When we think about A-frame ladders, if I have somebody standing on an A-frame ladder, and I'm going to stand them sort of in the, right, stand them about here, center of mass. What's really fascinating about this is that, and I drew this A-frame deliberately off, so it's not symmetrical. And it's deliberately not symmetrical because some of the better ladders are also not symmetrical. If it is symmetrical about the A, what's really fascinating is gravity always points down. And so the gravity line is here. And you'll notice that if this was a symmetrical A, your center of gravity is, and think about gravity going down, again, this way. Right now, this person's center of mass on the right is centered directly above their center of support. That is great. As we start to move, that's where the problem happens. Ultimately, one thing we want to ensure is that our center of mass, and if we have nothing in our hands, that's roughly our belly button line, like our midpoint of the body, we never want it to cross the uprights of the ladder. In the case on the left, here we have this person who's at the top, their center of gravity is actually off a little bit. And as we start getting to somebody standing lower, and this is not to say that standing higher is better necessarily, but we do see a surprising number of falls from like the last step. Be surprised at the number that have that as a feature. But it's worth mentioning that your center of gravity is already a little bit off. So if you start backing away, or you're leaning, or you're twisting, and this person is now kind of leaning over here, or worse, they take a foot and they step it onto a table here. I'm now taking that ladder. Their foot is pushing on this table, which might move. And it's actually putting force on the ladder in this direction, and the entire thing just goes whoomp, and down they go. So stepping off the ladder, bad. Leaning, bad. Having heavy objects in your hands, bad. Stick the heavy objects above your head, and it's even worse. Because my center of gravity, instead of being here, instead of being over here, it's now going up and up and up. And if I'm holding, a 10-pound box over my head, my center of gravity is now somewhere near my face. And I'm really having to work hard to even maintain my balance, not on a ladder. And if that wasn't all bad enough, think about how tiny those rungs are. You're now balancing all of your weight, all of this stuff going on a very small point in a constrained way. When we talk about constrained, if I'm standing on the ground and I'm losing my balance, I can move my feet in any direction. I can splay them, I can step back, I can do a lunge, I can do whatever I want. But when I'm on a ladder, I'm constrained in that position, which is further increasing my risk of a fall. And it's causing me to do things like twisting. We don't want to do the twisting thing either. So the physics of why we fall off of ladders, really fascinating. Now let's talk a little bit about the other types of injuries from ladders, because it's not even just falls. Struck by objects, either objects being dropped onto the helper if someone is passing up objects, or working above your head and then you drop things onto your face. I mean, I've dropped my cell phone on my face and that wasn't very much fun. There's hitting your head, there's storing ladders, but if you're not chaining them, they can actually just tip and fall on someone walking by. Even banging your shins while you're on the ladder is really common, and I'd love to say that I haven't done it, but I totally have. All the while, you've got pinch points, you've got all of these articulating kind of parts of that ladder. You can slip through the ladder and then down you go, or you bang part of your body and end up bruised, or you've got lacerations, you might have abrasions. And then there's all the sprains and strains, and these are also super common. We saw that aside from falls, musculoskeletal disorders relating to ladders was number 2. Some of the more common resulting disorders would be from carrying ladders. They're heavy, they're bulky, they're awkward. There's a lot of length to this. Groin pulls are quite common as well, especially if you're descending the ladder and then you miss a step, or you're straddling and then they like out on you. Another big challenge, we talked about the neck and the back. So anytime you're looking backward or looking up, you're taking your trapezius muscles and just like lifting them, just jacking them, and staying there in a static or constrained posture for a long period of time. Human bodies don't like that. We don't like being held in place. We like movement. Another is lower limb fatigue. So anytime you're on a ladder for more than 10, certainly 15 minutes, you're actually having to fire like your hamstrings, you've got your quads going, you've got your feet in sort of this constrained posture, so you're not moving around as much, and you've got your calves activated. And now again, it's a static posture. You're holding this posture and fatiguing your muscles to a much greater degree than you would if you were, for instance, walking, even if you were carrying the same amount of weight. And we're putting excess force onto a smaller part of our foot, so we can get muscle fatigue in our feet quite frequently, along with twisting forces if we're having to try to reach something from a ladder. There's also just, I mentioned the twisting and turning and just hitting other people. Another is electrocution. And if you do have staff that are doing electrical type work, obviously lockout and tagout is the very first part of that conversation. Like, do not work live. Do not accept this under any circumstances from your contractors. But also they should be using non-conductive tools and non-conductive ladders. Now, when we look at that 58% of portable ladders that we saw from CSA, what were some of the top causes? The top causes of the incidents that they looked at for portable ladders specifically, 26% missed the last step when climbing down, which was the single leading cause. Second was overreaching. Third was choosing the wrong ladder, either wrong size, wrong type. 3 points not being maintained, ladder not on firm level surface, and standing on the top rung or cap, despite the fact that these were people who were in fact professionals and they knew better and they did it anyway. So let's talk a little bit more about assessing risk. What are some things that increase instability on a ladder? The height of the ladder, the higher you are, the more unstable the ladder becomes. There's overreaching that we've seen some photos of. Choosing the wrong ladder. If you are using, maybe you have an A-frame ladder and like we mentioned earlier, you're leaning it against something, so we're not using it correctly. It could be that you are using a ladder that is designed for one thing and you're using it for something else. There's also poor ladder condition. That same retailer where I saw the person 30 feet in the air and felt the need to, politely but appropriately intervene. By the time I was done, 5 days of training working in that workplace, they didn't have a single A-frame ladder left in the facility. Why? Because I had to walk through their back of house area to get to the bathroom, and every single ladder I walked by was fatally damaged. So I walked by a ladder, spotted damage, reported to the manager, ladder got cut in half, went in the trash. And we repeated that for 7 ladders over the course of a week. And if I'm finding that many damaged ladders in that workplace, that really worries me. What type of damage were we finding? I found one where it was an A-frame style, and the actual steps, dead center of the step, the aluminum had actually split. There were dents. Some of them were missing like supports. It was broken fiberglass. It was unbelievable. But it really goes to show you, if this is what I'm seeing, condition of ladder cannot be discounted as a major contributing factor. Improper selection and setup, so wrong site, setting up the A-frame as sort of a leaning ladder. Poor location choice. When we talked about slippery, that's one. Staircases are another. And heavy objects. Heavy objects, I would say, is probably the most common that I see. When we look at things that influence severity, we want to consider the height of the fall. Obviously, the higher you are, the more time gravity has to affect you and the harder you are going to land, up to the point where you hit terminal velocity, in which case you're not getting any faster, but it's all going to be bad. We also want to look at the fall zone. So think about the height of the worker and then the step that they will be on. If I've got a 5-foot step ladder and I'm on the sort of, this is not a step, don't step here, I'm on that next one down, sort of that, 1, 2, 3. If that's like 18 inches and I'm 5'2", just take 18 inches off my height and then draw a circle around wherever that ladder is going to be. That's your fall zone. And that's the zone in which we want to look for things like that restaurant equipment. Or I don't know if any of you remember the WSIB video from maybe 10 years ago. They had to stop showing it because it was scaring people. It was the one where she's like on a ladder and then she falls through a glass display case. She's like, they've known that this ladder was a problem for a while. Now I'm not going to get married. That video was, again, justifiably terrifying. But But it shows that when we think about the hazards in the fall zone, how many of you would look at a glass display case and think to yourself, wow, if I land on that, like I am like this is going to be really, 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 really bad. Maybe not. So think about drawing that circle and assess the risk in your circle. There's also the body part that you land on, and that's not one that you are going to have a lot of control over. The flooring type and landing surface, like if you're landing on tile or cement, it's going to be a lot harder a fall than if you're landing onto something soft like the playground at your kid's school that's made of that, like, you know, wood chip stuff designed to absorb impact. Objects that are grabbed on the way down. We talked about that light, remember, where we saw the guy straddling? And I said, probably if he falls, the first thing he's going to grab just out of instinct is the light, bringing down that electrical with him. You could bring objects down, toppling shelves. You could be, you know, often you're going to grab anything in your immediate vicinity. One other fascinating factor is the age of the worker in terms of the severity of the fall. And there was a really interesting study, and we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes with age of worker. But there was a really fascinating study that looked at the age of the worker in relation to severity. So what are some things that we want to like really pay attention to from an assess? Ask yourself these 8 questions, and you're going to get a sense of whether or not you should even be doing this in a ladder. Is the task at a height of 3 meters or higher? If the answer is yes, a ladder is a poor choice for this, because you have to maintain fall arrest, and you cannot tie your fall arrest to your sprinkler system. It'll bring the whole sprinkler system down with you. If you don't have an engineered tie-off point for this, this is not going to work. Does it involve heavy or bulky items reaching or leverage? If so, how are you going to maintain this person on the ladder? Bulky, even if it's like not very heavy, but it's really big, that is going to be a problem. We're not doing this on a ladder. That's not a good idea. Is it going to take an extended period of time because of the fatigue factor? This is not a good idea on a ladder. Will it require the worker to stand sideways on the ladder or to step off the ladder? And if the answer is yes to either of those, you need to figure out a different way to do this, either where they don't have to stand sideways or where they don't have to step off the ladder. Are they working alone? Even a low risk type activity, like we're talking a 3-step step stool, getting a pair of shoes at a retailer and you put it on a little platform and then you descend the ladder. In the ideal situation, I still don't want you ever working on a ladder alone. Why? Because if you get hurt, if you do have a fall, you now don't have access to first aid. And if you've hit your head and you're unconscious, you're not getting any help. So, working alone, we have nobody to pass us things. Our ability to maintain 3 points of contact is probably pretty compromised. And the emergency response situation is nil. This is like a watch for the dangers in the fall zone. If you find dangers in the fall zone, you need to remove the dangers from the fall zone before proceeding. Is the surface slippery or greasy? If the answer is yes, you need to make it not slippery, not greasy. And if it's not level, don't set up a ladder here. And if there's traffic, of course, we need to mitigate this. Pedestrian or vehicle traffic, whether it be material handling equipment or even just shoppers, are enough that if somebody bumps the ladder or a piece of equipment bumps the ladder, that person is going down. So those are sort of the 8 questions that I would really look for as like the absolute high risk, don't do this situations. We also want to take a look as we're assessing the ladders themselves. Ladders have different weight capacities. They have different grades. CSA and ANSI, you know, the grades are very similar. How they write them is a little bit different, but ultimately you are looking to ensure that you are working within the load capacity of that ladder. And when we're thinking about, you know, 250, 300 pounds, I'm not a big person. So me with a bunch of stuff in my hands on a light duty household ladder is probably fine. But my brother is 6'5". He is probably 285 on a good day. And that's without anything on. That's without his size, what is it, size 15, size 16 work boots. They alone probably weigh 10 pounds between them. And then he's got tool belts, he's got clothes, and all of a sudden, when you think about 300 pounds, By the time he's clothed, he's over the limit. So he's either getting a special heavy duty grade 1 AA ladder, or he's not getting on the ladder. Although he's also conveniently tall, so he has to get on a ladder a lot less often than I do. I'm 5'2". Everything is up high. Older workers. Oh my goodness. Okay, so older workers are not only at higher, we think about older. Who's older? Anyone who is over the age of 45 is considered to be an older worker for the purposes of falls, because when we think about falls from same level, it is the number one cause of lost time injury for workers under the age or over the age of 45. And like, I am feeling personally targeted by that statistic because I am 44 and I can see time creeping up on me. What's really interesting about older workers, though, around ladder falls, being older doesn't necessarily mean that you're innately more likely to fall, but as we age, we're more likely to have medical or susceptibility factors like muscle weakness in the legs, balance issues, blood pressure drops, medication stuff going on that can cause dizziness, postural hypotension. POTS is now super common in our, it was a lot of people got COVID and then got blood pressure issues with on standing. Your reflexes slow as you age. We're gonna have foot problems as we get older. Welcome to Bunyan Town. Sensory problems. If someone is starting to develop diabetic neuropathy, they're starting to lose feeling their feet in a lot of cases. And being on a ladder, if you can't feel your feet, is not something you want. Along with vision problems, confusion, all of this can lead to higher risk for older workers. And when older workers do fall, the resulting injuries are both different and a lot more severe than younger workers. In fact, the National Institutes of Health in the United States, they studied the age of the worker and they found that it was a more predictive factor of injury severity than the height of the fall was. And while older adults are 3 times more likely to be admitted to the ICU after a ladder fall than a younger worker, despite falling less than half as high. Older workers are also a lot more likely to suffer traumatic brain injuries and truncal injuries, so that's injuries to your trunk and abdomen, than younger workers who tended to see more orthopedic injuries, lower limb and upper limb injuries. So more broken bones, fewer internal bleeding type injuries. So when we look at the risks for older workers, why did I want to include this? Because I was having a conversation with someone in retail who said, I have a 70-year-old employee who doesn't want to get on a ladder, and do you think I should start the progressive discipline process? And I said, do you really want this person on a ladder that badly? Like, if this person is telling you that they're having difficulty with balance on the ground and they have medical reasons and they are deeply scared they're going to fall off this ladder because they're not medically safe to be on a ladder, first of all, you have a duty to accommodate, but second, I can't even tell you how much you don't want this person on this ladder. It's a lot. Yeah, keep them off the ladder. If they're telling you that they're scared and they have real reasons to not be on it, don't have them on a ladder. Legislation-wise, you've got to keep your equipment in good condition. Of course, we know that from Section 25(1)(a). You have to provide information and instruction, and that includes on ladder use, as well as take every precaution reasonable. And when we think about falls from heights, we have Section 85 around the 3-meter rule, and there's 73 about portable ladders. There's also Section 45 that covers material handling that says that if you are lifting, carrying, or moving things, you have to lift, carry, or move things and withdraw them from a pile or rack in a way that doesn't endanger a worker. Does it specify exactly how to do that? No, but it says you've got to, which means it's up to you to figure it out. So we're getting to controls. We also have a couple of resources, and you can click on either one of the little computers here, and the resources will be emailed to you by the Safety Connection folks at the end of our session. The ministry has a guideline on the use of portable ladders, ladder stands, the rolling ladders. Their guideline actually defines what is short-term light work. It goes, in the world of the ministry. They talk about whether you're a woman or a man, whether you're using one hand or two, So what are the weights there? They say, this is how much you can have on your hands on a ladder. For me, if I have one hand, it's 12 pounds, which is still, for me with one hand, probably a lot. And realistically, in my case, probably too much. They also talk about ladder do and do nots that we're going to talk about here. And it very clearly establishes that you cannot have anything in your hands if you're climbing or descending because you have to maintain 3 points of control. So if you're wondering how the ministry sees the world of material handling on a ladder, that is a great resource for you. And I highly recommend that you read every single word of it. Because when they talk about every precaution reasonable, they're telling you what they think is reasonable. We also have a great ladder safety toolkit that's going to be emailed to you at the end of the program. Have you seen the ministry ergonomics on ladders before? It's been around for years. It's been around for at least a decade because that's when I found it, when I first started teaching certification. Wow. Okay, 28% said yes, 72% said they have not seen it. So when that link gets sent out, do read it. It is magical in terms of, it has a good level of detail to it. So how do we actually control for these risks? The very first thing we want to do is eliminate. Anytime we're thinking about controls, we want to think about hierarchy of controls. We want to eliminate our need to get up high. Why are we doing this? We can eliminate by using powered equipment to bring objects down to our level access. For picking or depalletizing, rather than going up to the object, you bring the object down to you. We can use long-handed tools, and like the sweater grabber at the clothing retail store is another good example. Or when we think about being in a restaurant, using a long duster pole to dust the lights instead of getting on a ladder to do this. We can choose to use lower shelves or stack objects at ground level. Costco in particular is really good at this. They don't pick at a height. In fact, they don't do a lot of picking at all. They have it all come in on a pallet. They put the pallet on the ground, and who picks the pallet? You pick the pallet, little by little as they go. This is a really good example of, well, folks will say, oh, but I really want to use all of that vertical space I've got. I say, okay, then how are y'all getting that down? By having lower shelves, it also prevents your customers from climbing your shelves or going and borrowing a ladder from your facility and then falling off of it. And just a quick reminder, when it comes to critical injuries in the workplace, you are required to report to the MLITSD all fatalities and critical injuries of any person in your workplace, not just workers. So if one of your customers grabs a ladder, manages to fall off of it, and gets a critical injury, you have to report that too. And as a result, I try to make this as, Homer-proof as possible. Picture what Homer Simpson would do in any situation and try to ensure that your general public could not do the same thing. I don't know if anyone is a Simpsons fan, but really ask yourself, is this Homer-proof? If it's not, try to Homer-proof it. Another choice is elevated work with robots. And while I can't name the customer, I did have a customer recently who, in fact, does work in sporting goods retail, who said one of our stores is now piloting a robot for picking shoes. Mind blown. As much as we don't think about robots coming in, the retail sector, I think there is potential here for these to replace the need to be at a height. And as they get better, the costs are likely going to go down. When it comes to restaurants, one of the elevated tasks I often see is menus. And so rather than using a menu that you're having to write a chalkboard and get on a ladder, if you use a display screen, you can then change the prices anytime you want just by clicking a button on your computer. It's a much safer choice. Have you managed to eliminate or minimize working at heights? If you have, go ahead and drop that into the chat. I would love to know a little bit more. So our next option is elevated work with ladder alternatives. What are our alternatives? Power elevated work platforms. Yes, workers need to be in a serviceable safety harness to do this. Yes, they do need to have fall arrest training, and I would recommend the Chief Prevention Officer accredited working at heights course if they are doing this. One nice thing with these is that they have an engineered anchor point, and it is right here, typically. However, if you are using these, you also need to have a plan for how you are going to keep people from, like, is it travel restraint? Is it fall arrest? They're not the same. Travel restraint is like I was that kid with the leash. I don't know if I was a terrible toddler. And so now they have like the baby backpack. My parents weren't even pretending it was a backpack. But that's travel restraint. You can only go so far. You can't get over the side. If it's fall arrest, if once someone falls, you need to have a plan for how you're going to rescue them because you need to get them off that harness within as quickly as possible, certainly within 20 to 30 minutes. Otherwise, they risk compartment syndrome and losing their limbs from that as opposed to from the fall. All right, we have an electric ladder. Okay, and an order picker to help with heavier, bulkier products. Excellent. When lifting storage room, when thinking storage room design, good to make the aisles wide enough to accommodate the space to use mechanical equipment. Yes, Alifa, I love it. Design matters so much, and you need the space to be able to make this work. Now, if you're doing high level picking, you can use order pickers. They have built-in travel restraint and fall arrest there, and you can see it. Got the harness clipped in. We're good to go. This is a great option for bulky, heavy picking at a height. Much better choice than trying to do this on a ladder. Even if you are going below 3 meters, these are a great choice. What's also a great choice are these work assist vehicles. They've got guardrails. They're designed so they don't go any higher than 3 meters. So you're still staying below the Section 85 3-meter line. They've got a platform you can put your stuff on. They are smaller. They're a little bit more approachable for folks in the retail sector. They're narrow. They're narrow enough you can get into an aisle. Highly, highly recommend. Ideal for picking and stocking under 3 meters. And I could not find a photo that was copyright cleared. So that is my own little handiwork. You're going to see some hand drawn in this. Are you using, I know one person mentioned that they are using electric ladder, order picker. Is there anyone else using powered equipment for this? Much safer choice. Largely because they've either got fall arrest or a guardrail around them, or in some cases both. Feel free to drop that into the chat. If you are using, and have you considered, maybe you're using them. Maybe you tried it and you're like, it didn't work for us. Maybe you haven't considered it yet. Again, the prices of these are going down. I'd like to, but it's too expensive. Yeah, that's one of the challenges. And then you start doing the math on like, if I have to have extra workers to be able to have that extra set of hands, how many lost time injuries have we had from falls? You want to look at the big picture of the cost. Yeah, order picker for distribution center, but not retail stores. For retail stores, I tend to see this more in the distribution center side of things, but I see these frequently in retail stores. And they're really designed with a retailer in mind. I'm not selling them. There are a number of different manufacturers, just to be very clear. But yeah, these are more designed on the retail, like light industrial side of things, whereas the order picker is more distribution center. I think that's a good point. So one of the things we want to do is choose, are they designed according to NCB 55? You know what? I don't know. So I can go and dig that up for you. If you send me a quick email, and by the way, anyone can send me an email, not just Natalie, but my email is tova.larson@wsps.ca. Feel free to send me a note if you've got a question. So what do we want to do in the engineering controls? We've talked about elimination. We've talked about substituting the ladder for other types of powered equipment. Now we're going to talk about engineering. Engineering is all about choosing the right ladder for the job. So we went from here, a terrible little light duty household piece of equipment, to something that's heavy duty with a grab bar. Or we could go from heavy duty to a grab bar to a steel work platform with handrails. See, that's even nicer. We've got lots of sturdiness. It's nice and heavy, much less likely to tip over, probably has a reasonably high weight capacity, big, wide platform for us to stand on. As we're choosing ladders, choose something that is designed for a high weight capacity, grade 1A or AA ladders. We can also choose ladders with wider bases as opposed to something that's kind of narrow. I would really love to see something here that was a little bit wider at the base, or there are others that have outriggers that you can deploy that actually give stability as well. That's again a better engineering feature. You could choose a ladder cage. This is a ladder cage that has a guardrail system right at the top. These are little gates at the back so you don't fall backward. It's got a gate that you have to open in to be able to descend the ladder. Nice big work platform and wheels. So rather than carrying this ladder around, you actually just roll the ladder to its location because these are quite heavy, but they are a much better choice. And they are especially better if you're having to do work for any length of time because your foot postures are not nearly as constrained. You don't end up with the same problem as you do with a rung. You could be choosing Big Blue. Again, something to be mindful of with the Big Blue is we want to ensure that our bottom of the unit, that locking mechanism is in good condition. These are a better choice over a ladder because they do have the handrails, they're easier to climb, but you still can't have things in your ladder in your hands when you're coming up or down them. And they are not designed to be used as a staircase. So if someone is like turning and just walking down them like a staircase, that's also not a great idea. You should be climbing down like you would with a ladder. But they do have a nice big platform for you to put objects on. And they're a little bit nicer because you've got that like bigger platform, nice grip. And they're heavy, so they tend to tip over a little bit less. Another thing we can do engineering-wise to prevent overreaching is to have the objects pull out to get closer to the worker. Here I'm showing it at a low level, but there are in fact racks, like steel storage racks, where it actually you can pull out the whole pallet and then you can pick so the pallet comes to you. Much better choice than the overreach. When we think about awareness, be sure that every single ladder in your workplace does have a load capacity and it is still legible. You could put signage reminding your customers to ask for assistance for elevated objects and not climb or borrow your ladders. We also want, as much as possible, to have our box weights marked so that if you are on a ladder and you kind of know what the policies say. To say, okay, if I'm using one hand, then I can only have 6 pounds in my hand. If that's the line that you've decided is the line in the sand, and I see a 12-pound box, then I know I have to either pick that up with 2 hands, pass it to somebody else. Marked weights allow folks to kind of know what they're getting into. You could also include some safety reminders on your bulletin board. Now let's talk about supervisors. So supervisor due diligence. Your supervisors ultimately need to understand how to use a ladder, what folks should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. And yeah, I do think supervisors should take a zero tolerance approach to unapproved equipment use. Obviously, what we're seeing in the photo is just like mind blowing. But why do staff do this? They do it when they're not set up to be successful. They don't have the right equipment. They don't have the right process. They don't have the right training. And if you've asked the question, how are y'all getting that down? You don't have a good answer for it. Or if you do, it hasn't been communicated to the workers about exactly how they are going to get that task accomplished. One of the biggest problems is sending mixed signals. Mixed signals are that thing where you go, we need to get this done fast, but also you need to do it safe. And ultimately, they're going to pick one or the other, and it's probably not going to be the safe choice. Clearly define what you think short-term light work is. I think short term is less than 15 minutes, and the ministry guidelines are a good start at determining light. I tend to cut those numbers probably by a third at least, especially as a smaller stature person. But you need to decide that you're not working on a ladder for a long period of time. One task, by the way, that just came to mind that I didn't have a photo for that is frequent in retail as well is store fit outs. And one of the hardest parts about store fit outs is that they're infrequent tasks. You know, you get everything down, you do a full refit, often done at night. People are tired, they're fatigued. And it's not a task you do very much. Another thing we can do is improve task design. One of the things I absolutely, I look at this photo and it just, my heart hurts a little bit, is that not only is this person having to twist and he's having to overreach, but if he is holding onto that box for dear life because it's heavy, he may not actually even have enough time to drop the box before it drags him over the side. So just because he's on one of these doesn't mean you can do anything you want. You still need to operate in a safe way. Task design matters so much. Establish safe work practices. You may want to consult an ergonomist about physical demands descriptions. You may not think ergonomist and ladder, but ergonomists are experts in movement related to work tasks, not just sitting at a desk and working at a computer. You may want to perform regular or infrequent task risk assessments. If you're about to do a store fit out and you only do them 2 or 3 times a year, sit down with your crew and think about what you're doing and make a good plan. It's usually the infrequent tasks we never get good at that we forget what the risks are. Establish some policies around ladder use and around where they're not used. Establish a good manual material handling program that incorporates elements of ergonomics into your ladder usage, or better yet, not using a ladder at all. Do have that contractor safety program I was going on about, and establish a working at heights policy. There's nothing that says your policy has to be 3 meters. It could be 2 meters. It could be 1 meter. But do establish a line in the sand that anyone above that height does need to have some level of fall protection. It could be a harness. It could be that you say, we're going to do 2 meters for contractors, and then we're going to use the work platform, the, sort of like the little picker thing for retail, and that, if you're going above a meter, you need to use that. Those are a few options to think about. And do provide your staff with good training on how to set up your ladders, how to inspect your ladders, and on manual material handling more broadly. For work practices, put some weight limits in place around how much you can have in your hands and hold folks accountable to those. But then set them up to be successful with other methods of material handling if you are going to establish a limit. We want to maintain those 3 points of control, avoid twisting, have your procedures in place, including great answers to how are y'all getting that down. Always have a buddy system so that you have someone to pass objects. We talked a little bit about the belly button rule as well. And about clearing the hazards and traffic in the work zone. This is critical. Do that little risk assessment of the fall circle to say, what's in my fall circle that could hurt me? We want to face the ladder when climbing or descending, and that includes on our blue, on Big Blue. Obviously, we're never stepping off of that ladder. And if you are using ladders for regular tasks, you may want to consider, and you're using an extension ladder, you may actually want to consider some sort of an anchor point that prevents tipping. Do inspect your ladders every single time you use them. And you're like, oh, every time, Toby. Yes, every time, because you don't know if the last person to use that 15 minutes ago got on it, broke it, and now you're about to get on it. Some workplaces, they'll say, oh, well, our Joint Health and Safety Committee inspects them once a month. That's not enough. You should be doing that too, but it's not a replacement for a pre-use check. What are we looking for? Ultimately, we're looking for bent or damaged rungs, bracing, you look at the feet, we look at the little A here, the support, make sure it's not twisted, that it's not bent. Check for homemade repairs. Sometimes folks will try to DIY this. For fiberglass ladders, I also really want you to look carefully at the fiberglass itself. I have seen a lot of workplaces where the ladder, if you just give it a quick look, looks fine. But when you actually start looking at the fiberglass is actually shattered and you don't have that structural stability. Look for your little sticker that has the capacity, as well as all of those standards that it applies to. Make sure it's free of anything slippery like the greases and soaps like we talked about earlier, and verify that you are in fact chaining these during storage consistently. Our last choice is always personal protective equipment and other types of personally worn devices. In retail, I don't see too many people wearing flip-flops, but don't wear flip-flops or slides even at home. Never climb a ladder barefoot. I can't believe I have to say that, but I will. The things I do see that are actually really concerning are ballet flats, and I see them all the time. A ballet flat falls off the foot really easily. It doesn't really have a lot of structural rigidity to it, so you're relying so much more on your foot and so much less on the shoe. Also, no high heels. If you don't have an established footwear policy that says, you cannot wear an elevated heel at all on a ladder, it is time. So what are we ultimately looking for? Shoes that have closed toe, closed heel, a rubber sole on the bottom, no leather, no plastic, so rubber grippy. Secures to the foot either as a slide-on like a Blundstone type boot that's a fully encapsulating shoe, or a lace-up. No Crocs. And it has to fit properly. If you're wearing shoes that are too big for you, it's not going to help. So, quick question about footwear policy. Again, feel free to drop that in the chat. Interesting scenario when the ladders are so high, figuring out how to pass a box. Yeah, ooh, Alifa, my answer to that is you probably shouldn't be doing that on a ladder at all. If YIT is so high that you cannot pass the box down to another worker, that is a fundamentally flawed task design. It is time to move to something like that little picker do for you. There's no other way to say it. And last, on the PPE category, we talked about travel restraint systems, fall arrest, even for folks that are under 3 meters, because the risk of a serious injury is still shockingly high. Loose clothing is also something that folks can get caught on, and it can actually cause them to fall if they're climbing or descending, or they're tripping. Another hot topic is, how do I carry things? And if I can't carry things in my hands, how do I carry them? If it's tools like, a screwdriver or something, use a tool belt. It's on your body. I've got like a little bucket that City of Ottawa compost bucket that I'll actually clip onto my belt with a carabiner, and I'll use that for like, gloves, or like if I'm having to climb up a ladder and then do something, I can actually put whatever little object is in that little bucket. So there are a lot of different ways that we can maintain that 3 points of contact. And then what are we looking for to evaluate as we tail off our session here today? You're ultimately looking at either reducing severity or probability, or preferably both. If you are looking to reduce severity, you're going to have to get higher up in the hierarchy of controls and to eliminate or substitute, where we're using alternatives to elevated work. So no ladders. If you're going to reduce severity, you can't do it with a ladder. But when we look at reducing probability, we can choose the ladder cage, we can use the picking device, we can be sure that staff are following the safe work practices, that our housekeeping is good, that we have good policies, that our supervisors are really aware of what the risks are and helping set our workers up to be successful. So as we head into 12 o'clock, thank you so much for joining us. I'll cover a couple of the resources just toward the end. As we tail off the session, I would love to know what your favorite takeaway was from today's session. Either something that surprised you, something that you learned, something that might cause you to change the way you do your work back in your own workplace. I would love to know what your favorite takeaway was. Feel free to drop those into the chat. as we cover some of the resources. We do have a number of resources available, and these are all going to be emailed to you by our fantastic Safety Connection crew here at WSPS. You will get a link to the ergonomics when using ladders and step stools directly on the ministry website, along with the WSPS Ladder Safety Toolkit. That's downloadable for free. Falls under 3 meters can be fatal. How to prevent them. We've got a great article on that. We have an e-course. I don't think that is free. That I think is the only one that is not. We have a safety check tool that's also in ladder use. There's a great case study that you can take a look at for ladders in retail specifically, and a ladder safety 101 quick YouTube, or I guess it's not TikTok anymore, but it was an Insta video. We also have some no-cost consulting. So if you are interested in having a material handling assessment at your workplace or a customer assessment, feel free to reach out. We can come to your workplace and work with you on that at no cost. These are assessments, again, at no cost. And we also have a great small business center. Again, the link to this will be sent to you. Depending on the size of your workplace, we've got some great tools, including a free handbook builder that you can use. And that's it. I'm excited to see what's hopping into the chat of your favorite takeaways. Interesting scenario. Oh, I think we covered that. The stats on ladder falls. Yeah, those surprised me even when I was developing this session. The hazards beyond falls. Yeah, everyone thinks about falls. They don't think about all the rest of it. They're like, oh no, I just like herniated a disc in my back trying to lift a thing on a ladder. And I was like, oh, that's not good. Substitution options, the new possibilities for retail, especially for small stock rooms. Those little powered pieces of machinery are designed to fit through tiny aisles and tiny doors. They're really, really good. I'm so glad, Alifa. Excellent session takeaways. Sometimes the warehouse may not have been set up correctly in the first place. That. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and by the way, if you do need to move your racks around, racking is not big IKEA. This is not a DIY project. Do not get your maintenance department just disassembling your racks and trying to put them back together like 2 feet wider aisles. Go and hire professionals. I cannot stress this enough. Not big IKEA. Holding contractors accountable. Oh my gosh, so true. Yeah, you didn't realize that they'd fall under our workplace's responsibility. The definition of the employer under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, of course, is a person or an entity that either is like hiring for the services of one or more workers, or is contracting or subcontracting for the services of one or more workers. So if you are contracting or subcontracting to another organization for, that electrician up on that ladder, you're still ultimately responsible for them. And your organization could be in fact charged under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and go through sort of the legal process and penalties as a result. So it's really important to know that you can and still will be held accountable if someone falls in your facility, whether they are in fact a contractor or they are in fact one of your employees. Yeah, more options for engineering controls. The job task risk assessment was helpful. I'm so glad. Considering the fall zone, customer critical injuries are also being MOL notifications. Yes, they totally are. I'll definitely encourage my supervisor to have zero tolerance. That is huge. Supervisors are those eyes and ears of your workplace. They have the duty to ensure that workers are working in a healthy and safe way with any of the protective devices, policies, procedures, and work practices as appropriate. They play a key role. Also, if you are interested in learning more about young workers, and many retailers have young workers as well as restaurants, you can feel free to join me for my next upcoming Safety Connection that is all about managing young workers, what every supervisor needs to know, shameless plug. And also, I'm going to put a shameless plug in for my session on, I believe, March 4th, that is all about flammable liquids. So if you're into that, feel free to join us for it. I'm here for further questions. If you feel like jotting down any more of those great takeaways, feel free to do so. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, have fun, and please make safe choices with your elevated task options. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay warm. For those of you that might be listening to the recording, it is currently -17 outside.